We're talking about the one tool you need in your toolbox to excel as a highly effective team leader. Let's start with a quote by Thomas Watson Sr., the founder of IBM. This is going to help us set the tone for today's lesson. Here's what Thomas Watson Sr. said. "I'm no genius. I'm smart in spots, but I stay around those spots." If you're going to excel as a highly effective team leader, the primary concept you want to embrace, some experts actually argue this is the foundational building block for the whole idea behind leadership success, and this concept is the concept of the circle of competence. The circle of competence. This one single concept is so important that once you grasp it, not only will it transform you as a leader, but it will transform your entire team. As a matter of fact, before we leave today, you will understand the importance of staying inside and the dangers of stepping outside the circle of competence. In our session today, I'm going to teach you what, why, and how. What, why, and how. What the circle of competence is as it applies to leaders, why the circle of competence is the foundational building block for highly effective leaders, and we will finish with an exercise that will teach you how to immediately start working inside your personal circle of competence. Behind me is a diagram, and you've actually got this in your manual as well, showing you the circle of competence. Inside the circle is what you know, and outside the circle is what you think you know. So the whole idea behind being successful is not falling to the temptation that most leaders fall prey to, and that's the idea of working outside their circle. I'm going to teach you the importance of staying inside your circle. Now, to help me explain, or to help me further explain what the circle of competence is, allow me to call on Warren Buffett. Some people would call the most consistently successful investor in the modern era of investing, and for decades a proponent of using the circle of competence as a way to focus investors on only operating in areas they know best. Warren Buffett actually wrote in a letter to the shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway, and I'm going to actually quote from that letter. Here's what Mr. Buffett said. "What an investor needs is the ability to correctly evaluate selected businesses." Note the word selected. You don't have to be an expert on every company or even many. You only have to be able to evaluate companies within your circle of competence. The size of that circle is not very important. Knowing its boundaries, however, is vital. Vital. Warren Buffett saying the same thing that Thomas Watson Sr., founder of IBM, said. "I'm no genius. I'm smart in spots, but I stay around those spots." Do you agree with me that success leaves clues? Hopefully you do. So we can actually study what successful people do and learn what we can do to emulate their success. Agreed? So let's take this concept behind the circle of competence and apply it specifically to leaders. Matter of fact, here's a quote. I'm going to use a little bit of a variation from the Warren Buffett quote. "Leaders, what you need if you are committed to being a highly effective team leader, and hopefully you are, is the ability to know what you know, understand what you don't know, and know what to do about it. The idea is not that you as team leader can do all things needed, but that your team can. And the team can when everyone is able to stay within their circle of competence." How many of you are familiar with Strength Finders? Perhaps the most exhaustive study on the importance of working inside your circle of competence. The book spent more than 5 years on various bestseller lists and ignited a global conversation, while the Strength Finders assessment helped millions of people to discover their top 5 strengths inside the circle. The basic question behind the assessment and the book is, do you have the opportunity to do what you do best every day? Do you have the opportunity to operate within your circle of competence on a daily basis? Chances are you don't. From the cradle to the cubicle, most of us devote more time to fixing our shortcomings than to developing our strengths. The team behind the Strength Finders movement has found that when we understand and apply our strengths, the effect on our lives and our work is transformational. People who work inside their circle of competence are, listen to this, 6 times more likely to be engaged in their work and 3 times more likely to say they have an excellent quality of life. Can you imagine how much more productive you would be and members of your team would be if you were 6 times more engaged in your work and 3 times more likely to have an excellent quality of life? You could not only change your team, we could change the world. So what is my circle of competence? What is my circle of competence? Here's an easy to remember definition. Focus on what you do best and eliminate or delegate the rest. Let me say it again. Focus on what you do best and eliminate or delegate the rest. That's the what behind the circle of competence. Now that we've defined the what, let's move to the why. Why the circle of competence is the foundational building block for highly effective team leaders. Perhaps the 2 best kept secrets about staying inside your circle or staying around those spots, as Thomas Watson said, are these 2 things. The less you do, the more you accomplish, and the less you do, the more you enable others to accomplish. Let me say it another way. Leadership is not always about getting things done right. Leadership is about getting things done right through other people. It's natural and sometimes necessary for leaders to try to be well-rounded. In other words, work outside the circle and do a little bit of everything in order to prove themselves. It's natural. Why? Why is it natural? Because as a leader, you want to set the pace. Because as a leader, you want to demonstrate that nothing is beneath you. You don't want to be seen as lazy. You don't want to be seen as elite. She thinks she's better than us. You want to be liked. It's natural. We want to be liked. It's necessary because oftentimes there's nobody around to help. Here's a case in point. When I drew the circle of competence on the board, I was working outside of my circle of competence, but I couldn't find anybody who was competent in that area to help me, so I did it myself. So it's natural and necessary. But what is natural and necessary will ultimately neutralize your effectiveness. The moment you as a leader move outside your circle of competence, your effectiveness as a leader immediately diminishes. Now, this may be counterintuitive to what many of you have been taught. Many of you, it's hard to undo years of training in a brief little session like we're doing right now. But let's do an exercise to help. Cross your arms. Just cross your arms. Now, you probably didn't have to think about this, but I want you to think about something while your arms are crossed. Are you right over left or left over right? Think about it. Now, uncross your arms and cross them back in the opposite manner of what you did. If you were right over left, go left over right. See how that feels a little bit uncomfortable? Many of you have been taught the concept, hey, be well-rounded. Work outside your circle. Get in the other guy's circle. So this may be a little uncomfortable for you, but you will have to learn to be uncomfortable if what makes you uncomfortable makes the team successful. Does that make sense? When you work outside your circle of competence, you free others to be more successful. Often in our attempt to be well-rounded, we walk around and work around outside our circle of competence. You know what we end up doing? We end up derailing projects and demotivating other team members. You may have worked for a team leader who didn't trust you and who micromanaged you. Remember how frustrating that was for you? How do you avoid being that kind of leader? Well, a couple of things you can do. Train your team. That's why you're here now. That's what we do. We're in the team training business. We've got tons of resources available after this session is over to help you train your team. Now, once you've trained your team, you know what you can do? You can trust your team. Once you've trained your team and you trust your team, you can focus on what you do best, eliminate and delegate the rest. Let me share a true story of what success looks like once you master the concept of focusing on what you do best and eliminate and delegating the rest, i.e. working inside your circle. True story. Does anyone know who Gary Kubiak is? Gary Kubiak. Now, there are two possible answers, and both would be right. Answer number one. Jim, isn't Gary Kubiak the former coach of the Houston Texans, who was fired after 8 seasons and a losing 61-64 record? Yes, that's Gary Kubiak. Hold on, Jim. I thought Gary Kubiak was the Super Bowl 50 winning coach of the Denver Broncos, the Super Bowl that we just had, 2016. Isn't that Gary Kubiak? Yes, that would be correct. So what's the difference between the fired coach and the Super Bowl winning coach? Let me tell you what Gary Kubiak says the difference is. Matter of fact, I got this out of a February 16th, 2016 edition of Sports Illustrated. Gary Kubiak shares his story. While coaching the Houston Texans on a Sunday night football game, he was walking to the locker room at halftime. All of a sudden, he staggered, his eyes rolled back in his head, and he actually collapsed. They called the ambulance. He was taken from the field on a stretcher to the hospital. He had suffered a mini stroke. Former Texans players said Kubiak worked himself into the hospital by working all the time and trying to do everything. Here's what Kubiak said. The incident forever changed me. The mini stroke taught me the importance of delegation. He cut back on his hours, focused on his strengths, and eliminated and delegated to his assistants. By embracing the concept of the circle of competence, Gary Kubiak went from a team leader fired as a failure to a team leader celebrated as a success. He is one of only 5 former NFL players to win a Super Bowl as a head coach and a player. Gary Kubiak is one of only 4 NFL head coaches to win a Super Bowl in their first year as head coach. Real examples of success, real example of team leader Gary Kubiak sharing with us the clues to his success, what amounted to Super Bowl success. So, we've covered what the circle is, focus on what you do best, and eliminate or delegate the rest. We've covered why it's crucial to your success to stay inside the circle, because highly effective team leaders understand the less you do, the more you accomplish. The less you do, the more you enable others to accomplish. Leadership is not always about getting things done right. Leadership is about getting things done right through other people. That's the what and why. Let's look at the how. We're going to close with this little exercise. This exercise, I promise you, is going to jumpstart your progress. This exercise includes parts to do now and parts to do when you get home. So classroom work and homework. Let's start with the homework. Before end of business today, I need you to commit to setting aside 45 minutes and going to strengthfinders.com and taking the assessment. That's step number 1, more on that later. Classroom work. Right now, I want you to answer, if you've got a pen and paper handy, I want you to answer in writing the following questions. In my current position, what are 4 things that I am responsible for? Think about it and write down 4 responsibilities. Now let me give you an example. As Regional VP of Sales and Marketing for a Fortune 500 company, my territory expanded over 5 cities in 3 different states, dozens of direct reports, and an independent sales force of several hundred. I had a lot of different responsibilities, but when I first did this exercise, I reduced the many different responsibilities to a list of primary responsibilities. So for the purpose of this illustration, let me give you my 4 primary responsibilities. Those 4 were recruit, train, and motivate a sales force to sell our products and services and manage 4. I have trouble counting sometimes. And manage an office staff of administrative support people. Recruit, train, motivate, and manage. So while you have dozens of different responsibilities probably, this exercise that we're doing right now is about narrowing that down to the 4 most crucial. The 4 most crucial. Now, of the 4 primary responsibilities you've written down, select 2, only 2, that you feel you are especially equipped and excited to do. Which 2 are the things that really excite you, really get your juices flowing? For me, I would reduce the 4, recruit, train, motivate, and manage, to 2, train and motivate. Those 2 things really excite me. So of the 4 tasks you've written down, what's your list of 2? Do you have it? This is where you focus your energies. This is your sweet spot. This is where you excel. Now, homework part. When you're back at home in your office, I want you to expand this exercise and take about 45 minutes to an hour to identify your responsibilities in your role as team leader. And I want you to identify them by reducing them to 1-word answers, like my example: recruit, train, motivate, manage. Then you're going to take the list. You're going to identify the primary things you feel especially suited for. Let's say if you have a list of 12, 2 dozen things. You're going to extract from that list the primary things you feel especially suited for. Then you're going to compare that list to your Strength Finders assessment, which will identify your top 5 strengths. Between the list you've come up with and the Strength Finders assessment, you're going to understand what's inside your circle of competence and what you should be focusing on. Now, you're probably not going to eliminate everything that needs to be eliminated today or this week or maybe even this year. But after all, progress has everything to do with direction and very little to do with speed. As long as we're moving in the right direction, we're making progress. So let's close. We should all be able to define the circle of competence, or the what, focus on what you do best, and eliminate or delegate the rest. We should all be able to answer the why. Why is this so important, Jim? Well, because highly effective team leaders understand 4 things. The less you do, the more you accomplish. The less you do, the more you enable others to accomplish. Leadership is not always about getting things done right. Leadership is about getting things done right through other people. I promise you, if you go home and complete the exercise, follow the plan outline comparing your strengths from the assessment with your responsibilities that you wrote on the list, and implementing a plan allowing you to focus, every one of you will know how to immediately start and consistently stay inside your personal circle of competence. Thanks much for your time, and remember, stay inside your circle.